I'm really excited about this. Today we have here together with us Dimitri. He has been doing a bunch of projects using Cloud Code. And guess what? He is not a coder. He has been doing this as a non-technical person. What he is bringing today is something that he has been using in the last months. I feel very excited about the opportunities that we have with AI for solopreneurship, for our design world, for evolving better products. And I hope you do too. So without further ado, let's welcome Dimitri.
Hey everybody, nice to meet you. How are you today? I hope everybody is as excited as we are. I would like to do for all of those who have not used any AI coding tools, I would like to just get one prompt started to show to everybody who hasn't been using this what it can do and what it can't do. I would like to introduce you to a tool that you probably know already. It's called Bolt.new. It's very similar to Lovable, but just for a demonstration purpose. So we want to build a dog dating platform where dogs can find their perfect mates. Let's go with that. And what you see, the AI has taken a prompt and it will kind of start thinking, it will kind of do some analysis, and in the end, it will actually write code for us here. Let's quickly look back at what we've gathered so far here in the Bolt tool. You see there is kind of a plan being created. There is a couple of files are being set up, and at some point we'll have a preview of our dog dating platform. This sounds like Bolt would be able to create us this amazingly new startup that we can just start market and it will go viral and we will all earn millions. This is the promise of these tools. Unfortunately, you will hit a wall. You will not be able to properly connect it to a database the way you want. You will probably struggle a lot with setting up your payment. You will struggle a lot with even changing the colors or changing UX slightly, because the platforms like Lovable and Bolt, they are set up to do, I would say, rather prototyping, to get kind of, a sense of the project that you want. If you want to go deeper and build more powerful tools and also have more control over what you do, you should not be using Lovable or Bolt.new in my experience. I always got stuck with these tools. My name is Dimitri. I'm an entrepreneur. I founded 4 companies so far. One of them was an AI company. That was way before AI was cool. So it was 6 years ago. And the AI tool that we created would allow any corporate to communicate customer friendly with their customers. So whenever you're in a customer service unit, you could write a really bad question and our tool would turn it into really customer friendly. That was way before GPT. It was actually pretty difficult to do it back in the days. But today, as you can imagine, this is something that is done very easily by AI. So why am I bringing this example? Roughly 2 years ago, ChatGPT and all of the other tools really started becoming powerful. And we sat back with my co-founder and we tried to replicate our technology from back in the days where we had to raise 1 million Swiss francs to get started. We hired 10 engineers to do the work to create this customer-friendly engine. And we sat back with my co-founder literally 2 months ago, and we recreated the entire tool in a weekend, being non-technical people, both of us. So this is kind of the power at the tips of our hands that we have. So if you're willing to do stuff, if you're interested to do stuff, if you're interested to go a little bit deeper, then you can actually do amazing things without raising money, without hiring engineers. And I think this is the exciting part. I've done so far 25 projects, 25 repositories with AI, purely with AI. I'm not a coder. And in 2 of these projects, I somehow became the CTO. So as a non-technical person, I am doing the stuff that I was not even able to do a couple of years ago, which is very interesting. And working on these 25 repositories and being CTO in 2 of the projects, there is a couple of that I gathered and that I would like to share with you today. All right. So what you see here is a way less impressive tool. It looks like a terminal, basically. And no matter how unimpressive this tool looks, this gives you way more power in what you can do with it. Claude Code, for those of you who haven't worked with this, this is a product by Anthropic. This is an AI company, and Claude Code is designed for coding. And with that, you can, in my opinion, almost get rid of all the limitations that you have with Lovable, that you have with Bolt and tools alike. However, if you just start up Claude Code and you try again to prompt your Claude Code to do a dog dating platform, more or less the same will happen. Yeah. And now we're getting into the interesting part. So in a classical software engineering world, you would spend a lot of time in understanding the requirements that you have onto the project. You would try to understand the user journeys. And I think some of you are in the UX or design world, so you know what I'm talking about. You would spend a lot of time understanding what technology do you use, what you shouldn't do, what kind of language to use, what databases you have to connect to, etc., etc. And with Claude Code, you have the possibility to do all of that. But in my experience, the really important part is the planning part when you work with Claude Code. What I'm sharing right now is a, let's say, planning protocol that looks terribly complicated and terribly long. And if I just scroll through this, you see the extent of that planning protocol. And to give you a bit of a sense of what it contains, it does help Claude Code in combination with your processing power, with your brain, to create an architectural planning, to create some branding and design systems, to map the user flow, to do some UX planning, and then to orchestrate or create a specs file. Now, the advantage of doing all of this work with such a huge prompt before you actually start coding is that after the planning phase, you and Claude Code will create a huge task list of maybe 3,000 items, very detailed of what it is that Claude has to implement. And there's things like wireframes, there's things like user flows, there's things like definition of what technology to use, etc., etc., etc. Basically, going through this document together with Claude Code, Claude would ask you, what do you want the users to be able to do? What do you think about design this, design that? What do you think about which APIs we want to use? And it helps you think and pre-plan dimensions that you maybe have not considered in the beginning. And let me show you the result of such a file to give you a bit of a better understanding how detailed your implementation or task lists become after you went through the planning protocol first. This is a task list of an actual project. The project is called commonground-app.com. If you want to check out, this is an app that was entirely created by AI. It's a scheduling app that allows a group of people across different companies to find common slots just based on their calendars. Basically a better Doodle for those of you who know Doodle. And the task list for this project looks something like this. So there's a phase one, a project setup. There is some dependencies installation. There is a lot of technical stuff going on, which I understand maybe up to 20%, not more than that. And for the non-technical people of you, this might be the same. Well, why am I talking all of this boring stuff? Because the next phase is actually becoming really exciting. Once you have a task list that contains the to-dos for an entire web app, for an entire project, you have the confidence that you can let Claude Code run on autopilot, let's say overnight. And in the morning when you wake up, you can go and check out the created website. And I would suggest that we do just that with this very specific task. The results of this huge task list that we just went through looked like this after Claude Code worked for an entire, let's say, night, and you wake up in the morning. So what you see is the ready app. There is a sign-in that you can use. You can sign in with the email that you want. By the way, you can also test this at home. It works for everybody. And so once you're connected, you can create a group. Let's say you want to go and do some bouldering with your friends. Instead of going back and forth and chatting, can you do it on Thursday? No, I can't. Can you do it on the weekend? No, I can't. The app allows you to connect all of your calendars and then with one click, see basically the common available times. So there is a time slot where me and my friends, we can go and do some bouldering. I can suggest a slot. I can select the times. I can give it a title, and the invites are being sent out. And if you wanted to do the same or achieve the same by just prompting Bolt or Lovable or even Claude step by step, kind of saying, I want to create this page now, then I want to create this step, then I want to create the login, you would hit exactly the wall that I was discussing before, at least in my experience. If you have other experiences, please let me know your secret. But this is what I experienced so far. So the advantage of pre-planning and properly preparing a huge task list that Claude or whatever agent you have for coding can execute later on in autopilot gives you huge advantages.
There were some questions about your huge prompt. April said that is the base Claude Code easy to self-generate, or is it generically easy to find online?
So if you check online, I'm sure there is going to be some of the prompts. I have to tell you that my prompt is customized very much to the tools and to the processes that I like. To give you an example, if you're starting to develop a project, you kind of define what database do you want to use. In my case, I love Supabase, and I have connected my Claude Code via an MCP to my Supabase, which allows me to create any table, to do all of the settings, to do all of the creation of tables, naming, renaming, security, etc., by just basically prompting Claude or having a task that is focused on the database type. So I don't have to do any of the UI clicks in Supabase, which is a huge advantage. Now, the good thing is you can do everything with Claude. The bad thing is you have one fixed tool that you have defined in your super prompt, in your app planning prompt. If you want to go online, you will probably find very customized prompts to the needs or to the setups that other people have. So I would recommend to you, if you're into the planning protocol, if you want to try this, to grab a template, but then to kind of tweak it to the tools that you like. Maybe you have Figma that you really like, right? So there should be a very specific tool in that prompt. Otherwise, Claude will just take the degrees of freedom it has and just go and do a selection, which might be a very wrong selection for your particular case.
So Gregory is asking, regarding the list, is there some specific order needed?
That's a very good question. The order that I would recommend you to do is literally this order here. Because in the beginning, you are looking at the architecture planning. In this particular prompt, Claude will ask you questions about what it is that you want to build, what's out there already, why is it better than the things out there, what should be in the MVP, and what should be kind of in the feature pipeline. And only then you start thinking about the branding. It's kind of difficult to do branding if you don't know what you're building, right? Because there is a certain definition of an ICP before you can do the branding, and so on and so forth. Thereafter, you go into the user flow, and only then you go to UX, and in the end, you get to the technical specs. If you kind of turn the order around, it will still work, but remember, whenever you have defined, let's say, the UX planning, and you go back and you change something in the architecture file, this change in the architecture file will literally have to propagate through all of the other files and change everything again. So you might get into a bit of a complexity there. So I would recommend to you to go in this order. This is at least what worked best for me. We talked about Claude Code extensively, so I will not spend more time on this one. I want to talk about Cursor. I think some of you wrote Cursor down. Cursor is a AI coding tool like all the others, but in comparison to Claude, you have the opportunity to feed or select different models for different tasks. If you want to have a project coded through Cursor, you can select that the coding should be done by, let's say, Gemini, but the front end should be done by Claude, and the databases should be done by, let's say, a model from OpenAI. So you have the flexibility to precisely select which models you want to use for what. And it also gives you the possibility to not max out one of your models, because usually you have a limit in Claude depending on the subscription you have, and it might max out after a while. So with Cursor, you have the flexibility to kind of switch between the models. There is, however, a huge disadvantage to this. If you're managing a project that is fairly large, your models need to keep certain parts of the project in context, so kind of in their memory, in order to be able to react to your request. If you're using different models for the same repository, you will run into the problem that each model has another context, so to say, and that you will run into duplications, that you will run in contradictory signals from one to the other model. So this is a disadvantage that I personally saw when working with different models. Talking about lovable and bold, if you're into prototyping, let's say you have a meeting with the client is telling you what to do. With bold and lovable, you could literally just prompt whatever the client told you he wants or she wants while sitting in the meeting. And by the end of the meeting, you would have a beautiful prototype. It would look like it's working. The client would be able to kind of see whether he or she likes it or give you tweaks, so to better understand the requirements, basically. If you want to go and take this to production and it's a more complex app than just a landing page, you will get into quite some trouble and prompting back and forth. So from my experience, stick to bold or lovable if you want to do fast MVPs or prototyping. Now, the last model I wanted to talk about is Codex. Codex is a coding model from OpenAI, so the same provider that provides ChatGPT. And Codex is amazing for coding as well. However, compared to Claude, Codex doesn't yet have the, let's say, advanced capabilities that Claude has. To give you an example, let's say you wanted to have a project that is SEO optimized from the beginning. With Claude, you have the opportunity and the possibility to create so-called hooks. A hook is like a double check of whatever Claude did with a second agent. So to give an example, you're writing some piece of content for a web page with Claude, and once it's done, it will trigger a hook, and the hook will initiate a second agent that reviews your entire web page, whether it's SEO optimized or not, whether it has all the technical optimization, whether it covers all the keywords, etc., etc. So that allows you to run Claude on autopilot and be sure at the end of the work that it's actually SEO optimized. You don't have these tools quite yet in models like Codex, for example. But what I personally do, I have Claude open on my right-hand side and Codex open on my left-hand side, and I kind of play them against each other. So whenever I think that Claude has maybe done a little mistake or doesn't really plan out stuff the way it should, then I have Codex that double checks the work of Claude and gives feedback to Claude. So the models are kind of playing with each other, and I'm just the person pasting stuff back and forth. And that is, in terms of quality, so far the best solution I've discovered. Let's talk about this. We looked at the planning files, and we looked at the concept that it makes sense to pre-plan stuff and have a big task list in the end. Now, whenever you use a model, you have something that is called context. So context is the amount of tokens or amount of information that each model can ingest. And once the model is the context is full, it will forget what it ingested before. I'm not sure if you've experienced this in GPT, that at some point, whenever you have a long conversation, GPT will just start forget things that you've instructed it in the beginning. That's the classical example of context overflow. So the model cannot take all the information that you have. Well, if you're using a task list-based approach to project building, what you can do and should do is call up different agents with separate context windows for separate tasks. So let's say you have a task list and one task is front end, the other task is back end. The two tasks should be done by two different agents. Why? Because then you make sure that you have no context overflow. If one agent had to do the entire package of tasks, it would at some point just run out of memory, and it would start forgetting things that it's done before. It would start forgetting how it's done things before, and create a totally different integration that doesn't make any sense at this point. However, if you split your task list and let separate agents do the very specific parts of your task list, then you have much better chances that you have no context overflow. On top of that, these agents can basically run in parallel, and that makes sure that you're building different parts of your project in parallel, and you're done way faster, which means front end is done by one agent, back end is done by another agent, database is done by a third agent, and they're done at the same time, more or less. And then you are much faster in creating, let's say, larger projects. So if you're building a portfolio page, literally what I would recommend you to do is to download Claude Code in your terminal. You can either ask GPT how to do this, or you can Google this. This is a fairly easy task to do. The next thing that I would recommend you to do, find some sort of planning protocol for your needs. But again, remember, this is very much optimized to the setup that I have. If you want to just Google another one and maybe add some of your favorite tools, you can do this as well. I would instruct Claude Code to read the planning protocol in my repository and guide me through the process. And while this is kind of reading the planning protocol, it familiarizes itself with the process that is described in there. And right now, Claude Code will go ahead and ask me the questions it needs for this project. So it will ask me, what is it that you're building? Who is it for? Why do you build it? Etc., etc., etc. You can simply kind of start answering to these questions. Or what I usually do is I activate the voice mode. So I'm just clicking on the voice record button, and then I start to narrate, basically walk through the room and say, okay, I want to do a portfolio page. I want to include my references. I want to have the testimonials up there. I want it to look really elegant. I want it to have this and that. And in the end, this will help Claude Code, which is working according to the planning protocol, to ingest all of your information in there. And as you see, this started already, right? So there is questions, what is it that you use? Is there any branding, etc., etc. So right now, I'm kind of entering a conversation with the AI. And while I'm doing this, the AI is absorbing all the information, and it starts storing all of what it's understood in my repository in, let's say, a planning folder. Once it's done that, your coding agent, or in my case, Claude, will have a very good picture of what it needs to do. And then it starts creating, some of the UX concepts. It will create wireframes for me. It will create a database design. And at this point, I usually spend 5 hours reviewing each file and trying to understand, does it really mirror what I told Claude to do? Or at some point, I might even ask myself, well, Claude suggests to do it this way. Does that make any sense? I haven't thought of this, but maybe this is a good idea. So I start iterating and going back and forth with Claude and really trying to get the perfect specs for my portfolio app. And if you don't do this and you start coding right away, you will have to change certain screens or certain functionalities of your portfolio page down the road when code is already written. And this is going to be a nightmare. This sounds like it's fairly easy. To do a portfolio page, this is literally the process that I would recommend you to do. So go ahead, activate the voice mode and start ping-ponging with Claude Code. To quickly demonstrate to you what this does, I went ahead and I created a little portfolio page of myself. I went ahead and I explained to the AI what I wanted to do. So I'm having a lot of projects in the go-to-market space, finding product market fit, building products, etc., etc. So it kind of took up some of my portfolio projects here. You see Common Ground that we looked at before. You see other things up here. There is some faked client success stories. These are not true. But this literally took me something like half an hour. And well, there is even a process of how the consultation happens. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, you can even book a call here. Yes, you do. So this took me roughly 30 minutes, but the success of that result compared to what Bolt or Lovable would produce is that I have a very clear documented task list of what I wanted. And if I wanted to extend this project now further and let's say include videos or have a login page or whatever, everything is documented. You have everything already in your repository and you can start kind of developing this over time instead of making this a one-shot portfolio page. If you don't specify in your requirements that you need to be GDPR compliant, that you need to have a cookie policy, that the actual code base needs to comply with the cookie policy, Claude Code will not do this for you. So hence, again, it's very important in your planning or in your specs generation to mention all of these aspects. So your value as a human that you provide is asking the right questions and bringing in the right specifications. Very specifically, I cannot tell you what has to be in there, but the process of getting this is by making this a requirement. And then your coding agent will go ahead, it will do some research online, it will ask you whether you agree with this proposal to make your cookies that way or this way, or to have this cookie policy or this compliance framework. And then it will do its best to, of course, make sure that your webpage has this. Do you have 100% guarantee that it will succeed in this and that you're bulletproof from a legal perspective? No. However, you can increase your chances that you are compliant with all of this by having, let's say, multiple agents that verify the work of the other agent. So it's kind of it's becoming a back and forth between two models or two agents. If you want to have 100% guarantee, of course, I would recommend to you to go ahead and also hire somebody who can review this stuff for you. So it gets a bit more complicated whenever you have frameworks like WordPress or the one, because you need to have some sort of access to the framework. So there needs to be a connection, either an MCP, which is just a tunnel for Claude to work with your CMS, that it can connect. If you check, or maybe if you ask GPT or Claude Code itself whether there is a MCP or whether there is a connection to a CMS, and when that's given, then you can do a lot. But if you don't have a CMS with an access where Claude Code can communicate or change things, then it's going to get really complicated, since CMS doesn't really have a code base where Claude can start working.
Samantha is asking, how do you connect the segmented parts if you are using different agents for different tasks?
That's a really good question. So the way, or what I found to work best, is that you have one, let's say, CTO agent. This is let's say, the boss. And the boss is responsible for planning the tasks in a way that whenever the workers or the agents grab a task and grab another task, that these tasks in the end can integrate, that they have some sort of, they fit into each other. And the boss, or the main agent, is responsible for the coordination, responsible to give the sub-agents, let's say, the frameworks or the standards that things tie into each other well. And all of that, of course, is then, again, pre-planned in your task list. That's how you ensure that, these two agents don't build stuff that don't integrate in the end at all. And of course, what you always have to do, and this is becoming a fairly big part of any AI coded project, is you have to do a lot of testing in the end. Now, tests can be done automatically. There is amazing frameworks like Playwright, if you heard about this, which is able to open a browser, click all of the buttons that the AI has designed, try all the paths, see whether there's broken links, see whether there's things that return errors, and then give to you, let's say, a automated test review. But that will not prevent you as a human to still, having to go ahead and do some of the testing.
Yeah, and there is a last question here that he did was, does AI have access to my hard drive if I run it on my terminal?
Oh, yes. So you have to be fairly careful when using Claude and giving it permissions. You could literally give it all of the permissions, and Claude would be able to just wipe your hard drive, without even blinking. You need to make sure that you kind of dedicate a certain, let's say, project to Claude where it has all the permissions, but it doesn't have any permission outside of this project. There is a couple of horror stories out there that Claude wiped entire databases and wiped entire hard drives, or created huge files on your computer so it became useless. So be really careful when you set your permissions. If you're using a planning protocol and you have a task list, your coding agent will not go outside of this task list. It will stupidly execute whatever task you have in there. And if you've done your planning work properly, there's going to be no task saying like wipe my entire hard disk, right? So this will not happen, but that still requires you as a human to spend quite some effort in the planning process, in the specs process, in the creation of task list process, reviewing the task list, whether there's anything that doesn't make any sense at all.
AI cannot do everything for you, and planning is the most important step here. If you get already made prompt and don't read it through to see what's there, or even put it there to another AI to analyze it, you may get some prompt from someone that you do something else in your machine that you are not really aware of. So it is dangerous for you to do that.
In case you want to stay in touch, here's my LinkedIn QR code. If you have any questions or if you're struggling with something, just drop me a message. And thanks everybody for your attention. And Carla, thanks so much for having me.
That was great. Thank you so much, Dimitri, for joining us. Thank you all for joining us today, and hope it was helpful to you to see a little bit of what AI can do by itself, the magic that is, and also the danger that it is, and that we are still the ones that are going to say what needs to be done. This is not magic. It's not an agent talking with another agent and then they deciding for you what should be built. It's really you in the comment. I hope to see you next time. Bye bye, everyone.